The Rebel Capitalist Show.
I want to ask you about another kind of hypothesis that I heard from Russell Napier. And he thinks that the gold sector, the industry, in the future could be included in this whole ESG movement. So earlier we were talking about, the cure for high prices no longer being high prices because of the restrictions and the government regulation that's preventing more supply to come online. But we know this is definitely happening with coal, with oil, with natural gas to a certain degree, where there's just been no investment into those commodities. And now all of a sudden we're seeing supply shortages as a result. And then what's the net effect of that? Prices skyrocket. So he thinks that in the future that those people who are kind of pushing that narrative could include mining into that, because in their eyes it's creating a lot of distortions with the climate or carbon emissions. Have you given that any thought? Because that would be very, very bullish to gold. We could see a move like we've seen in nat gas throughout Europe as an example.
Yeah, well, I actually have heard a lot of companies that are starting to talk about it, like Newmont, et cetera. So that is a labor intensive, but also an energy intensive industry. So they are looking at ways to offset that. Plus, there's going to be more costs with a carbon tax and all the new taxes that are coming in. So, I could definitely, but it isn't. But for me, it's not bullish on gold for that reason, because gold, there's a finite amount of it, period. And we can account for 98% of all the gold that has ever been mined. So, and there is a limited amount that's underground. For me, it's more about the money supply, and it's more about the inflation and the goal to offset that, because at the end of the day, it's used in every single area of the global economy. Right. So that's one asset, and it happens to be a financial asset that has the broadest base of demand. And we know that the price has been artificially suppressed because a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. They would much rather have you look over here at something that's easier for them to control and things that are intangible than something that you actually hold on to. You hold it, you own it, it's invisible. Even though I have it in my possession, for all intents and purposes, it's invisible. And so I think that's really where you get the downward. And I think what we're going to see is kind of like a spring, right? You hold your hand on a spring and you suppress it from really going where it wants to go. When that hand gets released, then it shoots in a direction, either up or down. And that is, I believe that's what we're going to see with gold until they do the overnight reset, and then you're really going to see it.
Do you think in this hyperinflation scenario you're describing earlier, do you think the way they instill confidence is going back to a gold standard?
Yeah, that's the way they've done it over 4,800 times. And that's the way, tell me what else has global confidence and acceptance in money form.
So what would that mean for the United States? I know supposedly they've got a significant gold reserve. I think China, and correct me if I'm wrong, Russia has also been building their gold reserve that they have with their central banks. So in that world, let's say we could just kind of wave a magic wand and tomorrow they're saying, okay, we have to go to a gold standard. What does that mean for countries who have more gold and then countries who have less gold?
Well, what that means is those that really have more gold will have more power and more say, which is why you've seen China, Russia, and India really. We've seen lots of central banks really accumulating, but they're the holders that have the best chance. In fact, I think it was Russia this year that surpassed us in supposed gold holdings. Don't hold me to that. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that Russia surpassed us in terms of gold in one way or another. So, they're going to have more power. Those that have less of it, like, I'm sorry to say this, but Canada sold all their gold holdings I probably would not want to be Canadian.
Yeah, so I guess what I was describing there, what you're describing is basically a Bretton Woods 2.0. At 1944, the dollar is the world reserve currency because we had all the gold.
Right.
And so that made the most sense. So whoever's got the most gold, maybe they try it again where they peg that currency to gold, and then maybe all the other countries peg their currency to the yuan or something, or how do you think it plays out?
I think it plays out more like the SDR, which is already a basket of currencies. They can expand that basket to include, frankly, all of the currencies if they wanted to. And they would include, which they've talked about, a component of gold. I don't see 100% gold backing, though it certainly could be done because it's just a mechanism of the price of gold in terms of the fiat.
Yeah, right.
But it's more likely that it'll be some level of percentage. And I don't think it'll be a one country's currency. I think they need a more universal, because I mean, everything is a double-edged sword. There are certainly pluses for the U.S. We have absolutely enjoyed a lot because we are the world reserve currency, so we can pay all of our bills in money that we can print. That's a huge advantage. But on the other side of it, too, that also means that we are basically the central bank of the world, and we have to constantly run a deficit in trade to kind of help balance out the world. So I think this will go more toward the SDRs and the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and then they would put a certain percentage of it in there, and it would probably be a large enough, I mean, as little as they can get away with, but a large enough percentage so that people had confidence in the currency again. And then you could easily have the local currency like the US dollar in this country, along with, it would be really easy for cross-border transactions if you had a currency that was a composition of every currency on the planet.
So does the IMF have quite a bit of gold right now?
They do, because I think they're the third. I could be wrong about this, but I think we're like the third largest holder because all of the countries donate the gold to them.
That's interesting.
So yeah, the IMF holds quite a bit of gold.
And I know they've talked about coming out with a digital SDR. I mean,
Oh,
I think their vision
the
is
SDR, the SDR is digital anyway, right? There's not a bill or a coin. So the SDR is really digital anyway.
Yeah, it's just I see that from that side of it, but I also see it if you got a digital currency, that also means that the entity that's using that currency, or with the central banks, if they're using that as a reserve asset, then they've got to have an account with the whatever entity is issuing that, and therefore that's going to give them a little bit more control above and beyond. Or at least they're going to be able to micromanage it. At least they're going to be able to have that. All that data coming in real time as far as what the central banks around the world are doing, because now those transactions are going to be on their balance sheet with just the SDR being in digital form without the central bank digital currency, or without being a digital currency. By that definition, they might not have all of that data. Therefore, they might be a little less likely to micromanage what was happening in each country. I kind of see it like a step up from what happens at a local level. If we have Fed coin, then although all the dollars are digital right now, that means all of us now have an account with the Fed.
Right.
So they're able to see every single transaction, where now it's a little more decentralized in the sense that B of A or Wells Fargo or whatever is the only entity that sees your transactions right now.
Right. That'll change. But yes, and you are, and you're right. And, keep in mind that the data or some of the reports that I've read from the IMF, they want all titles to everything held in digital form, because that really makes it very easy to spend it globally. So you can have a house in Texas, but it can actually be owned by somebody in China or anywhere else in the world. And if the IMF is managing all of those coins, it gives them a great deal of insight and control over everybody.
Yeah, and I get concerned because I think they're so closely related with the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, I would agree with that.